What brought you to the Eastern Dorrigo?
Well, my dad came up there to work about 1908.
And your dad, Angus,
Yes.
came there to work?
Yes, at the mill. The mill was on what we call the showground, the sports ground.
It was one of the first mills there in Newlong?
It would have been one of the first, yes, in the district.
What else did he do besides work in the mill?
Well, he worked in the bush. He could, well, like lots of them in those days, they could do anything in the bush. They could fall the logs, they could get them out of the bush and then put them on the wagons. 1907, my grandfather, Thomas Timms, decided on learning the potentials that were up the north coast on the newly opened settlements through his friend and neighbour, Jim Walker, from near Wollongong, where they had lived. He came up on the boat, and then they came up the mountain and built their little hut, and they used to go to Timmersvale every day, and they cut the trees, felled the trees to go out there, and this is where my dad said this is where he learned to swing the axe.
The farmers came from many different parts of New South Wales, including the Nowra district. Farmers moved to the Eastern Dorrigo early in the 1900s. The New South Wales government had released land for farming. Times were hard, and to earn money to buy established farms was impossible. The easiest way to get to the north coast was by sea.
Tom Mulhern moved to Karamba.
He moved to Karamba in about 1909. I think he was working in a sawmill there. Then he heard there was a gold strike up in the mountains, up in the Eastern Dorrigo. And he didn't find a great deal of gold, but what he did find up in the Eastern Dorrigo was timber. And that was the start of the Mulhern timber industry, and as far as we know at any rate. The two major ones, the two major players in the timber industry were Thomas and his younger brother Paul. they set up the sawmill down at Ashton, the village of Ashton. That was the first sawmill they had.
What year was that, do you think?
1910.
Ashton was a fairly central place then?
Well, it was a little village, as far as little villages go in those days. I suppose they had their bakery and their butcher shop and...
The Dorrigo Mountain was opened in 1893. By 1905, there were more than 40 bullock and horse teams moving timber and goods on the Dorrigo Road. The main town between Coffs Harbour and the Eastern Dorrigo Mountain was Karamba. It was growing and became the main shopping centre for the farmers, miners and timbermen. It was a rough, long trip from the coast to the Eastern Dorrigo on the New England Range. Firstly, a mountain range west of Coffs had to be crossed, then along the Arara Valley to Karamba, then up the narrow, steep mountainside to the Eastern Dorrigo. I'm sure the thought of their own farms motivated those early settlers to move there. Was it the Depression a reason that gold mining was more fashionable?
I'd say so, yes, I'd say so. Gold was the thing. My dad worked with an old miner called George Ellis for about 5 years in the mines. That's how we got involved with mining.
Yeah, what was his mine called?
We had the Advanced Australia mine, the Lady Mary mine, and the Highland Mary mine. And,
did he make much money out of them?
He made a living out of George Ellis did.
The Coffs Harbour jetty area was already a busy place in the early 1900s. That was where timber and farm produce was loaded onto ships for Sydney markets. The jetty became a busy centre. Shops were set up and government offices opened. At 2:30 a.m. on Sunday the 13th of January 1914, the fire bell at the fire station was rung. The Pier Hotel was burning and the fire spread to 14 jetty shops. The fire brigade couldn't do anything because they had no water. The BAT mill was also burnt down a couple of months later. Arson was suspected for these fires. Australia was at war in 1914. 20,000 Australian troops were sent to join the British troops in Europe. The Eastern Dorrigo had 36 volunteers, which was 80% of the single men on the plateau. The end of World War I was announced on the 11th of November 1918. Our troops were starting to arrive back home in February the next year. There was great excitement in the streets of Coffs Harbour. Balls and social nights were organised. These gatherings were tempered with sympathy and sadness for the families who didn't have their men coming home. The ship Fitzroy had been especially built in Scotland to work on the north coast of New South Wales. It arrived in 1912. Coffs Harbour became its base, and in 1921 it left the harbour for Sydney. It ran into a gale and was sunk. 21 well-known Coffs residents drowned. The 272-ton steamer Our Jack sunk in the same storm after leaving Coffs Harbour. 5 were drowned on it. Captain Colvin, captain of the Fitzroy, was due to retire. The timber cutting on the Eastern Dorrigo had given the pioneer farmers a way to make money. More sawmills were built with better machinery, and there was work for everyone. These men were great axemen. Look at the cut in this tree. The little villages were getting bigger. Tom Timms had married and worked his Bullock team and wagon. Tom took his family to Dorrigo to shop and to attend the opening of the new hydro plant the council had built. As he left for Dorrigo, he had no idea that this trip would change his life. Tom kept thinking about the hydro plant and how his property had a fall in level, just like Dorrigo. Tom had only spent a couple of years at school, but he started writing to England about turbines. At this stage, Tom was 24 years old.
In ordinary times, yes, all the power in the world.
Oh, right.
Power to spare, as a matter of fact.
That's right. What about water shortage? Was there any? Did you ever have any problems with?
Well, a couple of times while I was there was, dry weather and that, and of course there was more water going out then than what was coming into the stream. They used to have to close down for about an hour perhaps or more.
To let the water build up again?
Let the pressure build up, and away they went again.
All right. And what about sticks and eels and things like that going down through?
Oh, if the eel went down, matter of fact, while I was there, I had a bit of a problem a couple of times by eels.
Yeah.
They'd go down, of course, and that'd gum things up. Had to take the turbine, to pieces to get the eel out.
The hydro mill was the first sawmill to operate in Timsvale. Research has revealed that this was the only hydro mill of its kind in Australia. It had its own bush railway. Like all the timber villages on the Eastern Dorrigo, Timsvale was growing. The watermill was working, the forests had an abundance of millable timber, and the number of mills increased, and so did the population. It was burnt down while still being used in the middle of the winter in 1934. Tom Timms then built 2 more mills, one between Timsvale and Yulong, the other one at Bobo.
Was there many Bullock teams around when you were up there?
Oh, quite a few, yes. Oh, a lot. Like Wells had a couple, and Loudon's had some, and Seconds had some, and Lockie's had some.
You know all the names of the Bullocks?
Yeah.
Can you just tell me what the names are?
Well, from the top end, it started off with Rattler and Ted, Paddy and Smiler, Redmond and Spark, Dodger and Chumper, Ronan and Mick, Droga and Rowley,
Punch and Toby, Star and Major, and Ted and Sandy.
And you're walking along, you reckon that you use a pair of boots out every now and again?
You went through a lot of boots. When you brought them in the mob round where you was going to yoke up, they'd stand there. Because I always had a pretty good dog too. He'd see that they didn't get away.
Yeah.
Well, funny, they were fairly learned, Bullocks. You know, when you was yoking them up. Once you had the leaders yoked up, you just call them up, come up Rattledge Park, you know, and they'd walk up to where the yokes were and you'd yoke them up. Well, from then on, a lot of the times they knew their own positions.
Yeah.
Some of them would come up themselves.
A horse will bite and kick. What's
Yeah.
a bullock do? Does a bullock lash out anyway?
Oh, bloody oath. He'd kick all right,
A bullock would kick.
yeah. But not all of them. Some of them were pretty good, but others, you had to speak to them or put your hand on their ribs as you were walking past them and just say woo or something, you know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, once you got near his arse end, he'd let you have it.
You'd lash out, would he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They'd kick strangers and they'd walked up alongside them and they'd horn them too, some of them. Yes.
They, yes. When you were finished work, did they seem to know that it was knock-off time? And
Oh, I think so. They always got a bit better spring in their step when they were heading with that. But when you turned round and head them for home, they didn't take any driving.
Like the rest of the Eastern Dorrigo plateau, Timsvale was growing. The watermill was now working, and it was surrounded by forests that were supplying timber for the ever-increasing number of sawmills. Many families moved into the area, and the many bullock teams were hauling the logs, sleepers and timber. The timber industry was providing a great deal of employment in the area for tree fallers, teamsters, sawyers and mill hands. This timber was being shipped all over the world, to Africa, India, New Zealand, as well as to all parts of Australia.
bullocks working the hard ground and rocky areas, did they shoe the bullocks?
Some blokes did, yeah.
So, how long would it take them to go down there with the bullock team to Coffs?
Oh, I think it used to use up a week.
Use up the week.
Yeah.
Everyone would work hard in that era.
Yeah.
When you left school, what did you do?
I went with Dad with the bullock team.
Do you remember how many bullock teams were working on that in that area?
Oh, I can remember we had 7 working around the Malvern Mill at the time.
Bullock teams gave the bushmen a way of getting logs out of the bush. With wagons, they could haul logs quite a long way. There was at times a friendship struck up being a bullocky. Bullock teams were used for much more than pulling logs out of the bush. The bullock teams were busy. They did all the heavy work. Without them, many of these tasks would not have been done.
What did your father do? He was a teamster, 12 horses, you know, and a wagon. And he used to cart pine logs from Dorrigo to Raleigh.
So, what was his name?
Edgar.
How many horses?
Oh, I think about 12.
And it pulled a wagon?
Pulled a wagon, yeah.
Did it have brakes?
Had brakes, they were steel wheels.
And he used to buy pine logs
Pine logs.
and take them from Dorrigo down the Dorrigo mountain through Bellingen to Raleigh railway station.
Yeah, Raleigh railway station, yes.
And then you say the logs went on to the match factory in Sydney.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right, when he left Dorrigo, how long would it take him to get down to Raleigh?
Oh, it would be a day.
A full day's travel?
Full day's travel.
Down that Dorrigo Mountain?
Yes, you had to be careful there.
All right, and then coming back, what would he do? Come back empty?
No, things pace. There's no good running around empty. So he, there's a cart provisions back up to Dorrigo. He had a telephone pole contract, and some of the poles are still standing today.
They were draft horses, were they?
Yes, all draft horses.
What, would he sit up on the wagon and, like you'd drive a stage?
He used to walk alongside of them and talk to them.
Did he have reins?
No reins, no reins. He had some good leaders in there, and special horses for that particular job. They used to push the wagon aside as the case to go round a bend. But of course, sometimes the road might have been a bit wet on the cutting, and he had the unfortunate episode of going over the side. He lost a horse out of that.
Must have been a bad accident. I mean, getting horses and wagons and everything tangled up.
Yes, well, I've seen another teamster who went over the side, and I tell you, it's
not very nice, eh?
Very sad.
Coffs Harbour was growing. A regular bus service ran between the jetty and Top Town. The fare was sixpence. The 6-passenger horse-drawn bus operated well into the 20s. The Fitzroy Hotel generated electricity for its own use, and in 1915 permission was given for it to use electricity in several other Coffs Harbour businesses. The Chamber of Commerce had been pushing for the town to be supplied with water and electricity from 1918. Milk cost was 4p a litre. There was a newspaper article asking men to wear gloves to the dances. Surfing was popular, and locals were using 10-foot lumps of wood to ride the waves. The Eastern Dorrigo was well established by 1920. Road systems had improved and the villages were thriving. The railway was being worked on. There were many creeks and gullies and hills between Glenreagh and Dorrigo. It had 11 stations and 15 bridges and 2 tunnels. It opened in December 1924 and was one of Australia's most scenic railway lines. It was 70 kilometres long and climbed 2,400 feet. A passenger train ran up and back 6 days a week. With the railway open, more sawmills were operating. Brushwood timbers were the main type to be cut, but with the improvement of mill machinery and transport, more and more hardwood was cut. Tom Timms at Timsvale had been supplying Beale Pianos of Sydney with timber. They liked the quality of the Eastern Dorrigo product. They decided to invest in a mill at Timsvale with Tom Timms. This mill was designed with the latest methods and machinery that were available. 3 boilers, steam-driven electric generators. Now, the log that stood up in the log yard to winch the mill logs about is an example of the quality of the timber that grew on the Eastern Dorrigo. The mill was made up of a planer factory, drying sheds and steam-driven kilns. A crew of 30 men was employed for the Timsvale mill.
They actually had a tramway out in through the bush.
A steel tram, steel lines all the way.
They had to build the lines, of course.
Oh yes.
Yeah, how did they build them?
Well, they had a survey through the bush. There were no ploughs or tractors to do the earthwork. They do the best they can with the mattocks.
So it was all the hand done?
All hand done.
And the bridges, I suppose, you
yes,
had to...
the bridges had to be made. Up.
You say one had a horse to pull the logs in, horses. The others all have steam engines to pull them in, or...?
I don't know what happened in Tingsvale, but only the Cascade had horses. But later in life, they used some tractors or mechanical methods.
Okay, so, and how long would some of those tramways be?
Well, when I was working there, it would be about 4 miles, but I believe they're twice that, up to 8 miles now.
So as they would use up the timber at a certain area, they would just extend the line further?
Extend the line further out.
They must have been exciting days.
Yes, I suppose they are. Although I enjoyed my work there. It was hard work.
All right, so the train went out and you loaded them with these derricks on the side of an 80-foot tree. Any accidents? I mean, there must have been some steep grades and any trains ever get away?
I wasn't involved in any one, but I believe the old steam locomotive, which they had an accident with that, or at least they thought they were going to have an accident.
Tell me about it.
Yes, well, during the Christmas, everything stops and the weeds grow up over the steel line, and when they go out for the next one, and the first one in the new year, although they have sand on the locomotives, they do have trouble. Well, they were having trouble one day on the road going into Briggsvale with a load of logs. He found that he had to change gear, which is a very steep line, because the jolly wheels were slipping. No matter how much sand he put on it, still slipped.
This locomotive used to have to you could change gear.
Oh yes, he had to. I was referring to a changed gear. Of course, the changing gear is not like we change in motor cars today. It was a very crude turnout, as you might say. At any rate, he had a little bit of difficulty, and by the time he got the gearing changed and the steam turned on a little bit, the whole caboose of engine logs and everything was slipping down the line.
What, backwards?
Backwards. And he said to his mate, he says, jump. He says, I don't want to be down there because that bridge at the bottom, he says, it's only a rickety turnout. He says, it'll be pretty crooked. So when they got out, they recovered themselves, they started to walk down, and they didn't hear any crash, so they kept on walking, and after a while they found the old locomotive coming back at them. Yeah, coming back up the hill at them.
Well, Dad played for the dancers. He was one of the players. He played the violin. And of course we lived opposite the hall. It was Dad.
He played the violin.
And Mr. Walsh played the violin, and Jean Walsh played the piano. But it was good music.
Good to dance. What sort of dances did they do?
I think you could mention. They'd start with a waltz, then a schottische, then a one-step.
After 5 years of war, on Friday night the 14th of August 1945, a notice was put onto the screen at the Tasma Theatre that the Japanese had surrendered. Mill whistles blew, fire bells rang, and people drove around the town blowing car horns and banging empty tins. The next day there was rejoicing in the street. A man playing the bagpipes and a drummer had people marching and singing up and down the streets. The celebrating continued all day Saturday.
My dad, Dudley, he was born in 1914. He was the second youngest son. He actually started his own mill. He had the choice to actually take over one of the Mulhern mills, but he didn't want to do that. He thought, well, I'd rather start afresh. So he actually built a mill out at Brooklands Siding, which was known as Bobo at that time. Oh, probably 1942 was when he got the mill actually up and running, right through to the time he sold the mill in 1960. His problem was he ran out of timber. He sold the mill to Jack Seckham, Texas Jack Seckham. Well, the mill was actually, Tom Timms' mill was just across the road from Dad's, across the railway line. I remember that, and it was a sight to see the two mills working together. And I was privileged to see that. Smoke pouring out of the boilers there, and it was really good.
You remember those early days of the steam mills?
I do, with great affection.
Yes, they sort of had a life about them or something, didn't they?
Oh, look.
The mills would be working and chugging on.
I was woken up to I suppose it was the 10 to 7 whistle of Timms' mill at Geelong, which virtually was outside my bedroom. Yes. I think they had a whistle at 10 to 7, could have been 20 to 7, just to tell the men to get a hurry up. And then the minute to 7 the whistle went again. That's when the old mill started. You could hear the old wheels starting to turn over, and really music to my ears, I tell you.
Sadly, there were mill fires. Machinery was now taking over. Trucks were taking the job of bullock teams. The bullock teams were used in the bush to bring logs to the log dumps and to load logs onto trucks. Bullock drivers were now becoming truck and tractor drivers. What did you have to do to get your licence?
Come down a cough.
Yeah.
Police station, and they drove you around the street a bit.
Yeah.
Back to the police station, just rode it out. No, not near the hassles you go through now when you got to go and get a test with the RTA. God, blimey, that's bloody discriminating. That mongrel took me all out through in behind the bottom pub, up all in through them places, back on the highway, back up to the top lights, back down, round, and then back to the thing. And it took up about an hour. And I thought I did a good job. When I got back there, he grounded me too. I did this wrong, I did that wrong. Not spoken to when you're doing it or anything, no help whatsoever. And I kicked up that bloody noise there that he give me the license, but he cut it up in front of me eyes, thing. And I wanted like that license, you know. So he gave me then another form to come back in 3 weeks' time and have another go. So when I did, another bloke was there and I got it straight back.
Have you got booked? Have you been booked?
Booked?
Yeah.
No, never. Never had nothing wrong with me. My eyesight's right. I did a doctor's test every year. But just one mongrel part.
There were accidents right from the early days. Here 2 trucks met at a narrow bridge in a gully. Nobody was hurt. Back to the workshop to rebuild the truck. A couple of broken trailer poles. Tractor over. Crane over. Truck over.
Oh yeah, good. Wish I was still at it.
A bit easier than the Bullocks.
Oh yeah. You just turn the key on and the motor goes and you put it in gear and you're in business. Haven't got to yoke them up and walk all bloody day alongside them.
Truck accident you were involved in with the Mac coming back from Grafton. I'd like to ask you about that. You were only a young fella then.
Yeah, I was about 17, I think.
And
days.
Who was in the truck?
There was Vidler.
Stan Vidler.
Stan Vidler and Bobby Latter.
Bobby Latter. Rain and night. You getting back late?
We were coming back a bit late, yes.
And the truck hit the Bluff Bridge. You couldn't have picked a worse bridge, could you?
No.
A very high bridge.
Should have killed us.
Yeah, very high bridge. And what happened? Do you remember the night?
All I heard was Latter say, "Hang on."
After the Glenreagh-Dorrigo railway opened and the Forestry department put roads into the bush in the 40s, the timber industry grew. Many more sawmills were built. Timber mills were a protected industry and the mills worked long hours during the Second World War. The demand grew after the war. There was a great need for houses and timber. Motor vehicles were now doing all the carting. During the 60s, sawmills were built much bigger than during the earlier years. In the 60s, machinery was more sophisticated. These larger mills bought out the smaller mills to get their timber quotas. It wasn't until the 80s when electricity came to the plateau that electric-driven mills were built. After that, conveyor belts, hydraulics and automatic sorting was first used. Lighter chainsaws, tractors and trucks made life a lot easier and sawn timber production grew. Drop me off at the Bobo, mate. I'm going to walk to that distant ridge. Yeah, along that track where the pine trees end, in line with the river bridge. You know, there's something there that I've got to find. This side of the rising hill, for years ago at that very spot, was the old Brooklana mill. Now I wandered past that towering scrub. The undergrowth was deep. The only thing that I could find there was a rotting sawdust heap. I looked at that heap in the gully there, not far from the railway track. I tried to remember how it used to be. My mind went racing back. I pictured the mill, how it used to be, there where it once stood. The sound that came from the whining saws, the smell of different wood. The Bullock teams, they came from the scrub, the bobtails riding high. I heard once more the driver's call as they went passing by. They dropped their logs there at the ramp, then for the scrub once more. The logs were cut to the required size by men with cross-cut saws. The wire rope passed round the log, the dogs would tightly clinch the grinding sound as they rolled around, pulled there by the old steam winch. Now on the sliding frame the log was clamped, then came the mighty roar, the slab came off that moving log by the cut of the Canadian saw. The slabs were sent on that polished frame to the men who would specialise. The tailor out and his mate worked there. They cut the boards to the different size. The rubbish went down the boiler chute with sawdust from the floor. The boards were trimmed on the final bench by the man on the docking saw. The boards were placed on the trolley there to be pushed to the timber yard. That was the job that I had there. The work was sometimes hard. I pushed that trolley all loaded up to the stacks that reached so high, the tollawongs placed in between to help the timber dry. Over there, on that distant hill, the houses they once stood, and people I got to know out there when I delivered the firewood. Where are those people that I once knew? Do they have a memory still about the time we spent at the Bobo, at the old Brooklana mill? So what position did you play in the football team?
I was a 5'8". They took the jumper off me, they wanted to use it for the next game.
But coming home from a football game, busload of people, and you had a win.
I didn't think we'd ever get home when we beat Glenreagh. Picked the ball up from halfway and threw it over to normal Peter Koff, and we won the game. But I don't remember much after that. I don't know why, but I really enjoyed it. But they barbecued something, they got some meat, and on the way home they barbecued at some paddock. I don't know where we were. I don't know where we were at the... I've never felt so cold in all my life. The wind would sweep down from the Dorrigo hills, and Bruce introduced me to the showers at the mill. You realise we're in a timber milling area,
and it was so cold, I think it must have been minus 5 or 6. The icicles, you've seen stalagmites, they went from the shower, which was a couple of feet above my head, to the ground. I've never seen ice that went from the shower head to the floor.
Yeah, I got 2 of them there. They're big.
Friday night, Graham, the Friday night dances were the end of the week. Everyone would get down to the showers and make sure you scrubbed up with shampoo. And I know some of my mates, they really enjoyed their Friday night dance. The CWA Bull was as bigger function as I've ever seen. Not only would they come from Coffs Harbour, but the debutantes and the flower girls, it was a real spectacle, and probably some of the finest dances I've ever seen. And bulls and their dress code and the way the girls presented themselves. Yes. In fact, they used to sing on the bus. That was probably one of the most. If they went to a dance on the bus, they often did. Community singing was just marvellous. We used to know all the hit tunes. I bet you can't sing them today, but you used to know all the hit tunes from 1 to 10, because that's what happened in those days. You used to know all the hit tunes, and if you travel on the bus, which was probably an hour, or half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, the buses used to coordinate all the activities. Dudley Timms with his bus system. I think there was Blossom or something like that, with the little bus for the Saturday night pictures, and the big blue bus used to take us down to Coffs.
And blackbirds call so loud and sweet from every greenwood tree.
The Christmas tree, of course, was even more important, because the district would contribute from dances, from euchre parties and things all through the year, and the Christmas tree committee would try and raise a few $100, and we'd get a department store who would give us a discount, quite a significant discount of 25%, and we'd add it to the value of the gift, and we'd get a large Christmas tree. And of course, large Christmas tree means it would fill the hall almost, the local halls, and then the students would learn to do little drama, dances, Christmas carols.
Was a pretty big place.
Oh yes, Melton was as big as Loana. One of the best sights I've ever seen, I didn't appreciate it then, was to see a whole load of hardwood going down the road, down to Glenreagh. And I'm probably put in my memoirs, one of the best hardwood in the world. Was asked, I think it was towards the end of the war years, the Abel Tasman was only half full, and the amount of timber that came out of the forest up there, he was able to fill the rest of the load.
The train must have added a bit of romance to the place. A bit of
brilliant. I mean, it was a day. It was 1 o'clock. You had a train up and a train down, and the fettlers, they were the other workers, the fettlers, because the rail line with all the rain needed attention all the time, and the fettlers in tents in those days lived up and down the line, and of course Loana was the centre of the fettler industry. One of the main days of the year was the annual sports carnival. The schools, Timsvale, Yulong, Loana, Lloyd Siding, Moulton, would all get in their uniform for one day of the year, and they'd been practising for months. They were broad jumps and high jumps, the flat races, but the hallmark of the carnival was the team games. And Timsvale, under the tutelage of Ross Curran, used to, they must have practised for months because they were in step. And lo and behold, anyone who got out of step. It was a must. The Penalty Theatre at Yulong, Lyle Timms used to run that, and we used to get top grade pictures, and it was a family affair where everyone went and enjoyed a good run of the pictures. Not only would you get Superman, you'd get two main features, and of course the obligatory Western, which everyone joined in and cheered when the baddies were beaten by the goodies.
state forestry select the timber to be cut in state forests. There are many areas that are now set aside as never to be cut. National parks control a majority of these areas. There is little control harvesting on private property. Timber harvesting now requires a lot of planning so as not to damage the smaller trees. Log fallers are also directed to cut smaller trees which are more suitable for sawmills, but this then means that more time is needed between cuts. It's often been documented that the hardwood grown on the north coast of New South Wales is the best in the world.
I think they would always, as you see in the reunions we've had over well, I've come back since '88 to live in Coffs Harbour, and I've been to every reunion since, and it amazes me. It's a part of their life that they'll never forget because they were so close to the people that they either lived alongside or worked with, and went to dances, the cinema, and they really enjoyed themselves. And it's an integral part of their life and something they'll never forget. There were probably hardships, which even make their memories more important. And, well, it's obviously a part of my life that I'll never forget.
George, you've got one of the mines you use now as a tourist attraction.
That's right.
Can you tell us about it? So you get about 3 tourist buses a week,
Yeah, that's right.
and lots of cars.
Yeah, lots of cars, but a bit like a feast for family.
So if I went there, what would I see?
We'd take you, tell you the whole story about the mine and take you into the mine and show you the old stamper battery work, and it's very unique, that stamper battery.
In 1974, the Hunter Valley Steam Railways sought to reopen the line for tourists and to run their rejuvenated rail equipment. The locals got right behind the idea by putting a lot of money and their own effort, but this work stopped. The Glenreagh Mountain Railway was formed some 26 years later, and the Glenreagh Mountain Railway now operates a Class 19 loco and carriages regularly.
Thank you.